for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank you for holding this hearing. It's most important. And I want to say on the front end, I started my legal career, I was a lawyer, as the attorney for the Memphis Police. Spent 3.5 years working for the police, and I understand policing and appreciate policing and know it's essential for an ordered liberty and a society that has on the front lines men and women willing to risk their lives. On the other hand, and I have great respect for Mr. Gowdy, and I'm happy he's back here, he mentioned that he looks for the day that we rue the death of the lady, and I forget her name, who was apparently killed by her husband in a domestic violence situation, the same as we rue the problems with when a white policeman kills a black citizen. And I would have to say, with great respect for Mr. Gowdy, there's a big difference. One is a private tragedy. The other is a public tragedy because it's under color of law. And while we'd like to see no crime whatsoever, and that would be wonderful, we can only mostly be concerned about color of law killings. And that's something we should be concerned about. It's a big difference. I would like to mention a question for Professor Ramirez. You mentioned that investigation and prosecutorial decisions rest in the hands of DAs, and Mr. Gowdy mentioned recusal. Well, recusal is up to the DA. And in the recommendations of the President's task force, there were recommendations that we have an independent prosecutor. Congressman Clay and I have introduced a bill that requires states to adopt independent prosecutors' laws or face a cut in burn JAG funding. This would present a solution. Is part of the reason that the problem exists, is it perception? Is that part of the reason why you think it's important to have an independent prosecutor? Because the perception the public has that there is not independent analysis of the cases and independent determination of who should be prosecuted?
Yes, sir. It is primarily a matter of perception because I believe that the prosecutors across the country try to do the best that they can and exercise the best judgment. But because of this inherent conflict, there may be the perception in the eye of the public that this was not a fair and full hearing.
Yeah, and the DA's main witnesses are always police. And in my community, the DA hires, which makes sense, former sheriff's people or police people to be their investigators.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so there's an inherent conflict, and that's the reason we have our bill, Lacey, Clay, and I, because we think that not only would it would eliminate the perception, but also there's certain cases where it's politics involved. And a base for the DA who's elected is law enforcement, and it's a political problem. So that's number one. Ms. Rahr, you were a member of the President's task force, and thank you for your work and your colleagues' work. The task force recommended the use of independent prosecutors as well, where police use force and it results in death or injury. Was that recommendation where DAs did not, if the recommendation was based on instances where DAs did not pursue cases against police as aggressively as they should have, or again, was this more based on the mere perception of a conflict of interest and the damage that that perception can have to public trust?
In our debates and conversations, the primary focus was on the perception. And it is in recognition that we have to maintain public trust. There are many prosecutors across this nation that are perfectly capable, I believe, of doing an objective investigation and prosecution of police shootings. Unfortunately, we have to maintain public trust. And when you try to balance those two issues, it was the consensus of the task force that public trust had to have more weight than just the pragmatism of having that particular prosecutor.
And we're down to my last minute, but you mentioned training. Part of the bill I have with Representative Clay requires some kind of sensitivity training for police to understand ethnic differences and gender differences, et cetera, and maybe sexual orientation differences. Do you think this would be helpful for police to have training in terms of the diverse societies that we have today?
I do believe it would be helpful to have training. I wouldn't title it sensitivity training because I think the police would shut down immediately.
Yeah, I agree with you.
But I do think...
I'm in my last minute. I appreciate it. Sheriff Clark, let me ask you this. You mentioned in your testimony that much of the population in the state and low federal prisons was for violent crime, and probably that's true, but in the federal system it's mostly for drug crime. There's not so much violent crime there, and that's where the drug situation really fills up the federal prisons. And you said that illegal drug use is the scourge of the black community, and it is a problem, and leads to a great deal of violent crime. would you agree that marijuana possession is not the scourge of the black community and does not lead to violent crime the same way that meth, crack, cocaine, and heroin do?
No, I wouldn't agree with that at all.
Well, that's interesting, and I wished I had more time to talk to you. But thank you for allowing me this opportunity. And the defense attorney is not supposed to ask a question they don't know. But it was such an obvious answer, I just never thought I'd get that answer.
The time of the gentleman has expired. The chair